And we are live. Take it, Jonathan. Hold up. There we go. It got you now.
Hey, everyone. This is Jonathan rushing here on Soul Vitamins, our live weekly podcast that we do every week. If you are tuning in with us, we ask you to go ahead and like and share and even subscribe to this podcast that we do every week, where we talk about some great things going on in the world of Christendom and across the church around the world. And tonight we're really excited because we have some special guests. You're used to seeing me and Gabe on here, but we also have two special guests with us tonight that I'm delighted to introduce. The first one is LeAnn Moorhead Hamby, and she is currently living in Orlando, Florida, joining us from Orlando, Florida, and is the worship pastor right now at Southside Church. And she brings a wealth of experience to us tonight in music ministry, singing in worship teams, leading worship. And she really got this whole tonight's subject started with an article that she posted. We're going to talk about in just a second as we address, music and the state of music in the church in general that we see. Another one is the other person that's with us tonight is James Coulter. He is the pastor of the Hope Community Church out in Cottonwood, Arizona. I love this because we can all just kind of gather here virtually and share together. And he is with us tonight and has over 20 years of leading worship and being a worship pastor, and is now a pastor there in Cottonwood. So welcome to these here, and welcome to Soul Vitamins tonight, you guys. LeAnn several weeks ago posted, or several days ago, posted an article out of Christianity Today. It was a study that was actually done in the Southern Baptist churches about the state of music and the state of music ministry in the churches. And it really started a little discussion and thoughts online. And it was so interesting that Gabe saw this and said, "Hey, we need to bring this into a podcast, and let's have some discussion about it." So, Gabe, I'm gonna let you talk a little bit about this, and then we'll break into this and really talk about the state of music ministry across what we see, especially in the American church, and what we're seeing in worship and church ministries everywhere.
Oh boy. Yeah, so that article and LeAnn's I had to make it. Hey,
come on now, somebody's going to shout.
Yeah, I don't even have to do it with the keyboard. I can just do it with a.
That's right.
Oh, with a touch of a button. Holy Ghost, give me grace.
Yes.
Let's talk about this subject.
Yes.
Now, when LeAnn shared her thoughts in this thing, and I'm gonna be brief because I actually want you to. You can even just read your whole post, LeAnn, or if you want to summarize. But she touched on so many things that Jonathan, you and I have had conversations about. I've had conversations with other church musicians, other worship leaders, and even other pastors. And then you went in the comments, especially there's a group. So she posted it to her personal page, and then she shared it to it's a worship leader Facebook group, private group that I'm in. And that conversation I was like, I didn't even post anything. I think I just liked a couple things and said, I got to get, James wrote. So LeAnn had a short book. James wrote a short book, and I'm like, yeah, we need to do this. We need to do this online. We've got a first-time watcher, Miss Arlie Gage. I'm guessing Arlie's is that a female name? I don't know. I'm sorry if I've misidentified you, Arlie. Arlie was a song leader at her SM congregation, Southern something. I don't know. You have to help me out. You have to help me up until she was too old. See, I don't even believe in that. So, LeAnn, kick us off with your thoughts on that. With what you wrote down, and let's go in there. And then we'll try to hit some points in the article and not keep you guys here for 10 years, because we could go on this for a while. Miss LeAnn, take it.
Yeah, well, the whole thing kind of came up because I was talking to a pastor friend in Atlanta, and he has been trying to find a worship leader for a while and just cannot find anyone. And he's advertised the position at several Christian colleges that are supposed to be training worship leaders, and he's getting no applicants. And this is not like a 30-member church. And I thought, wow, I've never heard of that before. It was very interesting to me. So I went looking, and I found this article from Christianity Today, and it focused more on the Southern Baptist denomination, because I think they're the only ones that have really done the research and run the numbers. But it was very, very interesting. And so I thought, boy, this would be an interesting conversation. So I posted it on my Facebook page, my personal one, and then a friend that's in that same group that we're all in say, hey, you should post that in there. And it's really interesting because I had two very divergent conversations happening, because my personal page has, a lot of people that are not music ministers, and then the one page is all worship leaders. But basically, there is kind of a church-wide right now shortage of worship leaders, which came as a huge shock to me, because I've always just been where I was at and doing what I was doing, and I knew plenty of worship leaders, and it never dawned on me that there was a shortage and churches were struggling to find someone. And I just kind of mulled it over, like, what is causing this? And I think it's been kind of growing for a while. So I'll read to you what I wrote down, my short book that you were mentioning. I think I had like 6 reasons why I think the church is struggling with this. So my first comment is number one, with the demise of the church choir, there's been a dramatic decrease in the number of people involved in the church music program. That means the recruiting pool is tiny. Instead of having 50, 100 people member choir, you have like 3, 4 worship team members. And there's not a lot of opportunity for newcomers to find their way in, especially if they're a fledgling talent, or there's any sort of nerves or shyness there. There's not really an entry point. And for me, I needed that. Like, that's how I found my way in to church ministry, was being in the church choir. I was an extraordinarily shy person. I did not want to sing in front of anybody ever. That was a training ground for me. And if there had not been a church choir, I would not be a worship leader today. So that's really important to me. The second point I made, you guys might be singing hallelujah on some of this.
Actually, hold on. Before you go to the second point, like, does anybody want to add anything to that, like the demise of the church choir? I know, like, I'll just put my 2 cents in there. I was fighting that, kicking and screaming, and never gave up that fight. I was telling friends that were dissolving their choirs. I had a friend of mine here in the North Carolina, Charlotte area, that I told him, they actually, the congregation tried to hire me as the choir director because he had no experience with choirs. An incredible musician, but he's like, yeah, I don't really do choirs. I'm not really good at it. And honestly, he could have. They didn't really need me, but they didn't want to, they're like, hey, man, come over here and we'll give you some peanuts. And I was like, I'm sorry, I can't work for peanuts. I'm not an elephant. So they got rid of their choir program. The entire choir left the church and they started another church.
Wow.
And I told him, I said, don't dissolve the choir, because these are your servants. These are your tithers. And they didn't listen to me. So, James, you got anything to add to that? I'm sure Jonathan will.
Yeah. It just, I saw it coming, actually not too long, maybe even while we were at campus. Most of us, if you don't know, nobody knows, we were all at Lee University together. I've actually known LeAnn longer than she claims to have been alive. But
listen, she's only 27, okay?
I know, and we've known each other for 30 plus years. That's what I'm saying. But we were both, we all went to the same school, studied ministry, and we're in different choirs and groups there. And so when we were there, I saw kind of this transition happening early on, but a real kind of poignant moment happened in my very first church. I was actually hired to restart a youth. I mean, it goes along with what we're talking about. And this is in 2000. in 2000, I was hired to start a new restart a youth choir that had been really active. They'd had over 100 voices in a youth choir at a
Wow.
church at one time. And they had done a recording. They used to travel around in a bus. I mean, back in the 70s, they were traveling around in a bus. And the choir had died down. I was supposed to come back in and start it. The most I ever got was I had eight voices. That's the most I could get to sing in this choir. They were very talented. We did very well. But I went into the youth pastor who had over about 200 and something kids in his youth group. And I was supposed to meet with him, figure out how we could start this choir. He shuts the door. He looks at me and goes, literally, these are his words: "I hate choirs. I think they're stupid. I think they're a thing of the past. What do you think?" I'm like, yeah. And I'm supposed to start a choir with this guy, with his youth.
That's what that is right there.
That's what that is. But that is I didn't realize it at the time, but that is it was a micro expression of a broader feel in youth ministry at the time and since. And that hasn't just carried in youth ministry, it has carried into mainline church. And so, back in the day, we used to I could speak a lot. I'm going to shut up, but that's kind of the demise of the choir. Yeah, it's been happening for a long time.
Jonathan, you want to add to that?
Well, I could do a whole podcast just on this one
Just
point,
on choirs.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to do that. We'll have to
Let
get
me-
some of our lead friends and do one just on choirs and the importance
Yeah.
of choirs. We'll get Bradley Knight for that one.
Let
Ooh,
me
yeah.
let me just say that let's talk about the results of it, and then I'll talk about a few causes I think that have led to it. But the results are, and I won't give his name because I don't know if he'd want me to. I'd hate to give his name out publicly, but there was one of the leaders of one of the league groups. They came to our church back in the spring, and I was sitting there talking to him, and one of the been there for years and years and years at Lee, and leading one of the premier groups there. And as we're talking, I said, "Well, how is Lee? How is how is it going there in the music department, and how is everything happening?" And he just said, "Man, we are really struggling with some of the talent. We're having a hard time finding voices." And he was basically saying that, through the lack of, training in churches and things, that I think one of the things that we probably all share is not just the fact that we all went to Lee, but I would say that all of us probably grew up in church and were thrown up there. If you had a talent, you had to use it, and you had to get up. And
Yeah.
I remember riding down the road and my mother making me sing harmony, at 12 years old, and having to be up in church singing, and that's kind of how we grew up. So by the time we got to Lee, we had been singing quite some time. And what they were saying was, in fact, I was laughing with this leader of this group, and I said, I think back when I was there, and it was almost like a golden age, because I think about some of the guys that are out there now in the ministry world, and there's a bunch of us that were all there at the same time, and it's like, wow, I think about those kinds of talents. And I think not long after we left, is what James said, there was a breakdown of choir and music programs. Now, the cause of that, I think, is multifaceted. I think one, the professionality of worship became a big deal, where everybody needed to be professional. It needed to have that, certain sound. Two, styles changed. There's no doubt about it. The worship movement came on like a train, and everybody jumped on it. And I hate to say it, but I think the third biggest reason is laziness. Choirs take,
Bro, I got so much heat when I did that on one of our podcasts where you were out of town, and that was
Yeah.
a short. That thing I think has close to 10,000 views or something ridiculous, and it was People do not like being called out for being lazy.
Yeah, but they just, choir's a work, and you've got to bring a lot of people, and you've got to rehearse, and you've got to, you know, partly pastor
Practice.
and practice. And but to me, that's the beauty of the choir. It's more than just the sound, it's the community.
Yes.
And that pastoring of that community and shepherding that community. And I think so many have just gotten lazy. They don't want to deal with it, and it's so much easier just to get up there with a drummer, a bass player, a guitar player, maybe a couple of voices, and hey, I do it myself. And so I think all that has played into the demise of the choir.
I think that takes us into one of LeAnn's next points. But go ahead, James. You said you're going to add something.
Well, yeah. So yeah, the Doc Horton and I had a conversation about this years and years and years ago. And one of the things that happened with choirs was they lost their purpose, and it happened even before we were at Lee. And I'm not like you guys. I think most of you grew up in the church. I didn't grow up in the church. I grew up 7th generation heathen. And it's true, y'all. It's so true.
Yes.
But anyway, so I grew up singing, and I grew up in choirs, but it was I was in the Phoenix Boys Choir, and I was, did choir at school and had a show choir and things like that. That even in that venue, they don't have those things as much anymore. Like those have shrunk, even on the secular side. And I think that's a part of the issue we're dealing with. But anyways, choirs initially were established by David and the leader of the army.
Yes.
The first picture we see of choirs in Scripture is David and the leader of the army forming a choir. And there was a purpose for it. It was to lead worship in the house of God. And over time, the purpose of leading worship shifted to doing specials. And we lost the purpose. We lost the purpose of the choir. It's not that choirs can't do specials. They can, and I think they should. But the purpose of the choir is to lead worship. And it's not even to lead the congregation. I hate that saying. Don't lead the congregation. You worship before the throne of God, and the congregation will join you. That's a whole nother podcast in itself. But so they lost their purpose. And when they lost their purpose, in the midst of losing its purpose, we had groups, fantastic groups like Brooklyn Tab, Christchurch Choir, Prestonwood, all of those come up. And people tried to be like them more and more and more, really further shifting away from their purpose. And then you just had this absolute, really, when you think about it, within a very short period of time, the collapse of the church choir. And Doc and I had a conversation about the worshiping choir. LeAnn and Gabe probably remember these same conversations. I'm sure you had them with them too. And so some of the churches were able to shift back to the worshiping choir and get that as their focus. Those that couldn't lost it. They lost it. Anyways.
I want to read a comment, and then LeAnn, I want you to go to your next point. From Dustin Keith on Facebook, he says, if you look at Southern Protestant history, you'll see a constant downsizing from congregational shape note singing to choirs to a few with lead microphones, or to a few leads with mics. So take it to the next point, Mrs. LeAnn.
Yes. Okay. So my next point, and this might be touchy for some of you, but I don't think being a worship leader is kind of the hot seat at a church. And I think one of the reasons that there is a shortage is there is a hesitancy to be the one to sign up to stand in the hot seat and be the center of criticism and the worship war and every opinion. There's 200 people in the congregation. There's 200 opinions coming your way. And it's not an easy thing to navigate. And I think that there is a certain hesitancy for young people, especially who may not be emotionally ready to handle that, to step up and take that spot.
Let me break in here and just say this. I always say this, that every Sunday when I stand up I know when I start singing, I'm making somebody mad.
It's the truth. It's the truth.
Because the reality is, and, some of it's a good thing. Years ago, you pretty much had one set of church music, and that's what all churches kind of drew from. And of course, as over the years have gone, that has broadened as we've gone through the different movements. And I call it like, we went through, the hymnal movement, and then we went into the gospel song movement. Then we kind of went into this praise and worship movement with Hillsong and some of that. Then we kind of went into the alternative sound, that kind of movement. And then we kind of went into the alternative praise and worship kind of music.
The skinny jean worship.
Went into the black gospel movement, and everybody was singing Mark Condon and, all that kind of stuff, and Clint Brown kind of stuff, the syncopated black gospel kind of feel. And then it's kind of gone, what I'm saying? It just goes through all these different styles. And the crazy thing is typically whatever, when somebody was like in their teens and 20s, whatever genre was popular at that point in their life, it seems to lock in. And really, it's natural for all of us. I'm a big 80s music fan. Sorry if I offended anybody, but that's what I grew up listening to. And if it's 80s music, I can't tell you hardly anything in this millennia. I don't know much about popular music, but you take me back to the 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, that's the radio station I'm going to be watching. And unfortunately, church is no different. We've got all these different, genres that people kind of enjoy. And so, it's become difficult, like you said, in the hot seat, because every single Sunday, no matter what you choose, no matter how blended you are, no matter how wide your spectrum, somebody's happy and somebody's, frustrated. And I've literally had it happen. I have one set lined up talking about how much they loved it, wished I'd do more of it, and some saying that was terrible, wish you would never sing that again.
I got to read a couple of comments. Chris Darling. So you all remember Chris Darling, fellow campus choir.
Hey, Chris. Yeah.
Hey, Chris.
He says you can't be an effective worship leader if you don't have rhinoceros skin.
Yes.
Always dealing with arrows coming from somewhere. Now, I think what's very, Chris, I don't even know if you realize how, I hate to use this word, but it's really the only thing that comes to mind, how prophetic that is, because we really do that. It's supposed to be Satan's job to talk, you're supposed to be dodging the devil's arrows, and here we are throwing them at each other. And the other comment was from Dustin Keith again. He says, if you please everyone, you're doing it wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Boy,
the thing is it's not about them. That's the thing.
Oh, come on, James. Wait a minute. We're not there so you can play my favorite song, so I can get my jam on, so I can feel good about myself.
James says he's a pastor now, so he can tell it how it TI is.
No, I said it before, and anybody on my worship teams from before, you can even come and get on here and tell them, because I would say it. I would tell people that. I would tell them, look, it's not about you. As a matter of fact, I've said this. I still lead worship because we're such a small church. We have a worship leader, and she does a great job, and I'm trying to kind of help her come along. There's skills and things that she needs. But I've told them there are songs, as a worship pastor and now even as a pastor, there are songs we do on Sunday that I really, personally, I don't have a problem with them theologically, but I don't like them. But I do them because I know that it connects somebody in the congregation with the Lord. That it gives them a voice to sing and connect with God, which is what it's about. That's what it's about. Yeah. It's about worshiping God. And so, but I've also told them, you will never know what songs those are. I will not tell you. My wife doesn't even know what songs they are, because I could be pulling her out of worship thinking, oh, he doesn't like that song, when it doesn't matter, because it's not about me.
Amen.
Yeah. Let's name some and see his face and see that. Raise a hallelujah.
I ain't saying it. I'm not saying it.
Well, we're definitely not going to go into a reckless conversation. LeAnn, No, that's a whole podcast. I'm not even going to get myself started. LeAnn, did you want to add, like, because
that's a sloppy wet conversation.
Sloppy wet.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, but some of them I just can't sing. I'm sorry. Some of it, I don't care how popular it is. I just go.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I agree.
There's been some that are super popular and I love and minister to me, and I've tried it at the church, and they just are not responding.
Oh yeah.
If they're not getting it and they're not responding, no matter what number it is on the chart and how much I love it, it's out. I need the church to respond. But you know, there's lots of.
I'm sorry.
There's lots of hot songs out there, and this song probably connects in another church. It doesn't connect in this one. And so, as a worship leader, I'm always monitoring. Is the church worshiping? Is the church singing? Is this song too wordy and my church is just sitting there watching us? I don't want to do something where people are just sitting and watching. And if we've done it 3 times and they're still just sitting and watching, it's out.
Yeah. You bring up a great point.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
You bring up a great point, and I was going to say this. I was having a discussion years ago with another music pastor, and he was talking about this whole idea of, what was popular, and this is a great song and all this. And, I explained to him, I said, listen, to me, and this is important, is we've got to be careful that we don't start worshiping the music. We have to worship the Lord. And the music is just a tool. It's just a tool, just like the piano is a tool or the guitar is a tool. We can't worship the guitar. We can't worship the piano. We can't worship the song. We have to pick the songs that help the people worship God. And as I was sitting there telling this other gentleman, I said, listen, I don't care if my congregation takes country gospel to be able to access and really experience the presence of God, then I'm going to sing country gospel, because that's just, I'll try to pull them in a different direction. But I see this all the time, where I see young worship leaders that will get up and they're singing the top 40 or what they heard the latest Elevation tune that came out.
Oh, no.
And
you didn't just name drop. Just
or Bethel or whoever you want to say, and they think they're going to recreate.
I'm teasing.
They're going to recreate Brandon Lake's, deal, and they'll even go get the tattoos to match
and jump off the stage and stage dive.
Yeah, and the reality is, it's not doing anything for their congregation. So to me, the biggest job of that worship pastor is to make sure that he is utilizing music that is going to lead his congregation in to the presence of the Lord. And that's different for different places. I mean, if you walk into a black church, it's a completely different type of music than you're going to sing at, backcountry Kannapolis, where I'm at. And I'm sorry, y'all, we are country out here, so don't be offended.
It is what it is.
No, it's worship language is what it is. I used to go on mission trips all the time, and I loved trying to learn. Like, I went to Russia one time, and I loved trying to learn while I was there phrases in Russian and how to read Russian and all of that stuff. And I actually got to where I could read Russian even though I couldn't understand it.
Привет.
And but when I got back to the United States, nothing hit like hearing somebody speak English, that I hadn't heard in, I didn't have to fight to communicate. And worship language is that way. Our job is to create a place where people can connect with God, and as worship pastors. And so it's really finding that language of that church and giving them that language. You can shift that language over time, but you can't go in, because I was hired to do this one time. I was hired to go take a Southern Gospel church and turn it into a contemporary church. It didn't work. It didn't work because I tried to do it too hard, too fast. And then over time, they became more contemporary. But to this day, and it's one of my favorite churches in the world still, but to this day, they have they are Southern, and then they have contemporary element.
I think what bothers me, and I know we got to get back into the subject matter of choice, but the idea is, I constantly say this, that let the church be the church it is, so to speak. You're not going to go into a black church and turn it into a white church, but yet we will try to take a Southern church and turn it into a contemporary church. We do this just because somebody has come up with the quote unquote right way to worship. This is the better way. This is the more modern way. And I just sit there and think, I kind of think of it again like the radio dial. I think some of the things that made, what used to be the radio dial, but even, okay, Spotify or Pandora now, there's a ton of people that listen to 80s, and that's what they want to listen to. And there's a ton of people that listen to rap, and there's a ton of people that listen. And it's the variety of that really speaks to, different people. And so to me, I mean, as long as we push for the excellence to do it well, to me, that's what we are looking for, is to get people into the presence of the Lord and press for the excellence of music and really help the congregation form an appreciation, at least, even if it's not their thing, an appreciation for the different styles, and help them understand that theirs is not the only way. That's the big thing.
Yeah.
Right. One thing I was asked to teach on this subject actually at our state convention last summer. I did several hours of workshops, and one of the things that we have a lot of churches that are just singing. They don't have anything newer than the 70s on their roster, and the churches are aging and dying, and their young people are going elsewhere. So, my conversation is, if you want the young people in your church, then you need to sing some of their songs. But you don't have to totally abandon your songs. Like, they should have deference for you, and you should have deference for them. Like, if you should allow them to sing the songs that they like, and give them space for that. And then they should have the loving kindness for you to give you the space to sing what matters to you. But you can't, you can't hold on to tight reins and not allow space for the younger people in your church to have a chance to sing their heart music.
Right.
Heart music is a big thing. Everybody has heart music.
Yeah.
We all have like the song. You hear the song, whatever the song is for you, and you're just instantly like, oh, it's Jesus, I love you so much, and just like stir something deep in you. Everybody has that, and every generation is in a different decade of what their song is. And I find it's very important that everyone in my church, I want them all to be able to hear their heart song every once in a while. It's a challenge, because my church is extremely interracial and spans a lot of generations. So,
and that's beautiful.
It's amazing. It really is amazing. But it takes a lot of intentionality to try to cover everybody's face.
Well, I think and this is the funny thing, it shouldn't be as challenging, but because modern worship has become so, we have more diversity, and we have zero diversity in our music, which that article states. I mean, Fanny Crosby is the #2 song leader under Chris Tomlin, and something like 90%, I can't remember what the percentage is in the article, of the churches are written by the ones we just named: Hillsong, Bethel, Elevation, and I can't remember what the other one was. We do need variety, because we are
Passion.
Yeah, passion. We are multi-generational. We are multicultural. So how in the world did we go from having all these micro genres of music, and then you go to church and it's like, you're going to get one flavor, baby. You are getting vanilla. You can't have nuts. You can't have chocolate. You can't have caramel. You can't have nothing. You are just getting vanilla ice cream. I ain't picking on white people. I'm just saying it's the most bland of all the flavors, I got to read some comments here. We've had some amazing comments up in here. So Chris Darlin dropped some. He said, I get so tired of songwriters using poetic imagery as an excuse for making compromising lyrics that confuse more than direct worship. Bam.
Yep.
There was one that Dustin Keith dropped.
Did you see what James Matchek said?
Oh, I'm getting to that one.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
I'm getting that one. It was, oh man, I'm gonna have to find it here. No, that wasn't it. It was good. It was really good. Well, let me read the other one that Darling said. He said, Dr. Horton always emphasized that a church would only follow, your lead if you start out by learning their heart song, exactly what LeAnn was just saying, and ministering from there first. James Matchek said, let us all not forget as leaders, the song has to be authentic to you. If it's not, the congregation won't believe you. Be careful not to lie when you lead, which I think a lot of that is you got folks that are getting gray hairs and, well, I'm still got to fit in these skinny jeans and sing the song that was hot on CCLI, the top 40. It's in the top 10, so we got to do this tune. Corporate worship should be corporate. Keep the focus and message on him, all caps, and they will believe you. Good stuff. So, and Caps had an amazing observation. He said the two services emerged due to this lack of compromise, and I want to have my style. So it's like, okay, old people, we'll give you your stuff, and nobody's going to go there, and that service is eventually going to die, and we're going to do all the young stuff here. But now we have the youth are having their own services, and a lot of mega churches, they have their own service. So why in the world? I was at a church where this happened. I'm at a mega church, something like 4,000 people there, and the youth had their own service. The children have their own service, and I'm like, why are we singing all this new stuff for people that are 40 and older? And
don't get me started. Don't get me started on that though, because the whole thing on segregated church, that's another topic.
That's another thing. So LeAnn, take us to the next point.
The next point I think is a large part of James's book. So I'll set it up and then James can read and go over some of the points from his small novel.
You got your comment section pulled up, James?
No, I can't.
You know what? LeAnn can read it. So LeAnn, read that point, and then you can.
Yeah. Basically, one of the barriers for entering worship ministry for a young person is the pay. Lots of churches want extremely skilled musicians that have all the technical skills that being a worship leader requires now. I mean, you have to know a lot to be a worship leader now. And they want to pay what they paid a worship leader 30 years ago, and people can't survive on it. I'm part-time. I have a full-time job. I have a career, and I'm leading worship because they needed somebody, and I had the skills. But we don't have the money to pay, and we probably might have the money to pay, but not going to pay what it would take to have somebody that could afford to live in the Orlando area. It's expensive to live here. And
it's expensive to live on Earth these days.
Yes.
Especially in the U.S.
So James, James, he went off on this, how much it costs to get those skills, what it takes to live.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, do you remember the statistics?
Oh, I do remember. Yeah, I remember. I don't remember exactly what I said, and I was trying to pull it up. But yeah, but it's insane. So I've actually went and looked at some stats. So here's some quick, and I know not everybody likes stats, but I'm just going to throw some out there. So in 2000, when I launched from school and started becoming a worship pastor with my first worship pastorate, the average income per household was $42,000. Okay. Average cost of a home was $119,000. Weren't those the days? Cost of a car was $21,000 for a new car, and the cost of education per year was $8,000. So now go to today, the average cost of per household for income is $76,000. Average cost of a home, $350,000. The average cost of a car, $46,000. Average cost per year for education is $19,000. So, or actually almost $20,000. So, but here's the thing, percentage-wise. In 2000, percentage-wise of income for a yearly income for a house was 284%. So you're almost three times, the house was almost three times the cost annual household income. The price of a car was roughly half the cost of your annual income. Price of education was 20% of your annual income. Fast forward to today, average cost of a house is 456% of your annual income per household. 456%. Average cost of a car went from 50% to 60%. Average cost of education went from 19% to 26%. So almost 50% more than what it was in 2020. So pastors are wanting people to still work for, and I understand it. I'm a pastor. I get it. I look at the budget. I totally understand it. But when you look at what it costs for housing, and that's just housing, cars, and education. That's not including that now if you earn that much money, and I thought about this today, your tax bracket changes. They haven't changed the tax brackets. So your tax bracket changes. So you make less money on the taxes anyway because of taxes. And it's just a crazy thing. And you cannot afford to go and get the education that you need to do the job that you need to do and come out and make the kind of money that you need to make to pay back your loans. You know, they want people that are skilled and crafted. And they can't. I told my daughter, I can't believe she's actually going to school for ministry. But I tried to talk her out of it because I was like, baby, unless you get out without a lot of loans, you will not be able to earn enough money to pay those loans back.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
And so, and the problem is, I had one pastor that he wanted, and this was way back in the day, he wanted me to work 50 hours a week, not including Sundays, because he said other people are working 50 hours, so you need to work 50 hours and then be here on Sunday as well. But he didn't want to pay me what those people working 50 hours a week were making. And then if you have that today, you can't do a side hustle. You know, if you're working 50 to 60 hours a week at a church and you want to make some extra income, how are you going to do that?
Not enough hours in the week.
Not enough hours. And then if you want to have a family and the church, and here's my thing, and I'll hush after this. Here's my thing. As a pastor, we're supposed to teach people how to have their life in balance. And yet, as pastors, we want our staff to be out of balance.
Oh.
We want to teach people you need to give up some of that income so that you can spend more time with your family. And yet, as pastors, we say, I'm not going to pay you very much, and I need you to work crazy hours at the church.
Come on, man.
I think in comparison to what you're saying, you know, I remember when I came out, I started music ministry in 1998. You know, a low full-time salary was going to be, you know, 25 starting. That's a starter. You know, guy that had a little bit of experience could get 35. And boy, if you were a mega guy, you could get 50,000 a year. That was, you'd be like, man, they're paying 50,000. I can't believe that. Now, the crazy thing is, like you just said, the inflation rates and stuff have shot way up. But the pace of pay for, you know, worship pastors has not shot way up. And that coupled with the fact that when I came out of school, you pretty much needed to know music and the spiritual side of worship, but now it's like you're supposed to know, you know, that plus Ableton plus Pro Presenter plus you know, putting all the latest, you know, tech stuff that needs to go with it, and multi-tracks, and how to put all this
on board.
how to run this. And so really the skill sets have, you know, increased by double, but the you know, price. So even today, I'll have some pastors every once in a while to come up and say, hey, I'm looking for a full-time guy. I'm like, okay, so let me see what I got, you know, out there, and what are you willing to pay? And they say, we're looking for somebody for 30,000 a year full time, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, look, I mean, I don't even know if you're gonna get anybody out of Lee for that. I mean, you might have to just find, you know, a little old fella plays guitar somewhere. I mean, it's just, but the crazy thing is then, you know, on the, you know, on the secular side, they understand the worth of a musician, you know, a lot of times. And so these guys are going out singing, playing on the secular market and getting much, much more money than what they can. And so kind of going back to your article, LeAnn, I do think this is part of the problem, in that there's probably some people that would like to be in the worship, you know, ministries, would like to be a worship pastor, but literally look at it and go, there's no way I can afford to do it. And so they find themselves having to pursue other avenues because they got families and stuff like that. And, you know, the reality is, I know, and this is not a knock at pastors. I used to be one myself, but it's so funny because when you tell the world out there what a lot of pastors make, they go, wow, I can't believe they're making that much. But when you tell them what a lot of musicians make, they go, wow, I can't believe they're not paying them more.
Yeah, it's true.
Very interesting.
Had to.
One of the lead professors weighed in on the conversation, and I don't want to call him out, but he was saying, you know, as somebody that is teaching upcoming worship leaders, they're struggling with two things. One is their parents don't want them to major in it because they want them to get a degree that they can actually support themselves on. And two, the people who want to do it, they don't want to be a worship leader at a church. They want to be the next recording artist.
Yeah.
So,
you know, and Nate Ridgway is the one that hooked me up because Nate told me I was going to be a music ed guy, and you know, to have a backup plan, and he told me I didn't have enough faith in Jesus, that I needed to do church music only. So
I'm texting this to him right now.
but I'm telling you right now, Nate, you hooked me up, son, because, you know, later on I was like, Lord, what am I going to do? Because I can't make enough money. He hooked me. He said, you just don't have enough faith to believe in God's calling. You need to get out of that music education. And now if I had somebody coming to me and asking me, I'd like to be a worship pastor, I would literally tell them, you need to be a music educator because you might have to have something as well.
And I would. And a lot of the music educators would be like, don't come here either. It's I know this is going to be, you know, so I don't know. I don't think anybody in here other than myself has a lot of tinfoil hat conspiracy theory, you know, in their closet. You know, y'all might, you know, we're believers, and I believe we're all pre-trib here, so that gives you instantaneously like half of a conspiracy cap, because you know we know all this is coming to a head, and even people like Joe Rogan are being like, oh wow, the mark, this is one world government, yeah. So the Bible talked about that, yeah. You should read it, Joe. Yeah. There's a couple comments I wanted to read. One especially by Amber Easton Payne that just really took the cake. She said there's a lack of humility to be mentored, fighting against a lack of mentors who desire a successful move of the Spirit over their secured spotlight. It's why the discussion over genres and performance over simply leading others to the throne room is still taking place. Woo! And this is something Chris Darling added to the conversation earlier. He said, that's very true. However, I would also turn back and say that there are some students coming out of school with zero leadership experience expecting to make the same as someone at a mega church. And I have to say, yeah, love you, darling. He's got to head out, so hopefully he can come back. And Dustin's Keith, he said he's got a tinfoil hat. Okay, brother. So why I wouldn't even tell a musician to go, an upcoming musician, why I would try to really test them and poke them to see if they isn't the Lord telling you to go to school for music, you know, for music. I mean, even ministerial or even secular. I've been pushing musicians away from college for like 5 years after I met this guy that went to Berkeley, got $100,000 in debt, tremendous saxophonist, and I'm like, this kid at the time could have bought a house for what he spent on his music education, and all he knows is how to play saxophone.
Yep.
He didn't even know
Yeah.
how to get his album pressed on vinyl as an independent artist. And I'm like, didn't you just go to this resource that I've known about for 20 years as an independent, artist and producer and musician? I'm like, you went to Berkeley and you don't know about disc makers? But I believe it's a demonic I don't want to agenda is to dumb down the music. I think that's why they've pushed it out of a lot of the public education. I was just having a conversation with Charlie Fisher, a friend of mine, 20 years, a music educator, professional trombonist. He's played on many of my recordings, talking about one of his students that is this kid is a wrecking ball in the school. I mean, they are having a hard time dealing with this kid. But he's a pianist and he loves classical music. He walked into the band room one day when classical music was being played, and this kid went to his next class a completely different kid. I mean, that's and there's studies, there's books, there's stuff that that'll be a whole other thing. The power of music, where they have run experiments in public places like train stops where they've played classical music and the crime rates go down.
Oh yeah, I pulled up stats today, and I won't go over the stats, but on education, music education in secular school, and they talk about how 86% of schools still have some form of music education. They're like, oh, music is still there. The problem is it's not what you would call level A or A level music education, which is where you're learning about, you're learning about composing, and you're learning about relationship with each other, and you're learning about music history, and you're learning about notes and why do you sing that. It's not just somebody getting in there and repeat this note, da 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 da, and somebody repeats it. So it's not just that they still have music, it's the level of music, and you nailed it, has gone down. But where they
by
teach
design.
level A, where they teach A level music, it's like the stats are through the roof. Here's just one in students with GPAs, or students in schools that have A-level music. There's 85% of them, 85% participating in extracurricular activities compared to 55% in schools that don't have it. They have a 20% higher probability of earning a bachelor's degree. They have a 31% less risk of getting involved in substance abuse.
Wow.
And that's not just from, again, and that's not just schools that offer music. That's schools that specifically schools that offer A-level music education.
Now apply that to the church.
Very few of those.
Apply that to the church.
Yeah.
Imagine if we could apply that to the church.
Well, if you start talking about, tonight we're talking about the lack of worship musicians or worship pastors in church. And if I had a young worship pastor, and maybe we could kind of go around the table here, and what would you give as the number one tip? I can tell you for me, I would tell them, get involved in a ministry group somewhere.
Facts. Facts.
To me, when I went to Lee, I love Lee, great professors, but my biggest part of my education was being with Dr. Mullman and Lee Singers, you guys with Dr. Horton and Campus Choir. I mean,
and me with both.
What I learned just doing ministry was probably more valuable than what I learned in classroom. And I'm sorry for all you classroom instructors, love you, but as far as doing the ministry aspect, I learned the music aspect in the classroom, but the ministry aspect is really where I learned out on the road with these groups. And I would tell anybody that's interested to get in music ministry, get involved in ministry somewhere, either in your home church, in a group. If you go to school, get involved in a group, but do ministry, because I think that's the biggest thing. That doing is learning. When it comes to any other tips that you guys would give on a young music pastor or worship leader?
I'm gonna dovetail on that one, because that's what I've told musicians that come up to me, and the parent bring the kid because they know I tour, they know I've produced and done all the stuff. I tell them, go. Oh, you want to be a playing musician, touring musician? What style of music do you play? Go there. Go where that music is made. And I mean, that's what I would tell James. I'd ask your daughter, what kind of ministry are you trying to do? go to a church that has that ministry, and instead of spending $20,000 a year or $10,000 a year, whatever it is, go to where that ministry is being done and learn under the people that are doing it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I mean, it's just are we successful in ministry? I mean, in successful meaning we're still doing it. Right? We have comrades that have quit.
We haven't quit yet.
They've quit ministry altogether. Some of them.
We are too stupid to quit.
Yeah.
That's right.
I don't know the meaning of the word chicken.
But, what we learned by doing it. It wasn't sitting in a classroom in campus choir and lead singers and EVS and symphonic band. It was, we're going to take you to a church and minister. We're going to take you over here and you're going to minister. You learn to do ministry by doing. And, as they're finding out, and PBD's been preaching this for like I think about 10 years, you go in a classroom, and unless you're learning under somebody that's actually doing ministry, it's like, man, you're irrelevant, because as fast as the world is moving, as fast as the world is changing, and the methods are changing and the technology is changing. I mean, you can take a class this semester, and next semester it'd be nearly irrelevant. Unless you're, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I would say I'm somebody who I understand and celebrate the educational part of it. Like when I went to Lee, I learned, like, I had no clue how to read music. And I came out of Lee doing something that I really loved, which was doing a lot of studio work. And there was no way that I would have ever done a single session had I not been able to read music and sight read.
Right.
And so the education, I don't know that you can take that out of it, but you can maybe get it in a different way than traditional education going to a university. But I have said, kind of going back to what Jonathan said, I went to NAU for music and right out of high school, and I was a horrible student. I ended up failing out of it. I hate to admit that, but I did. But I will tell you, after being in that school, going through that program, Lee University, please, I love Lee, but just going music education to music education, in other words, the skill of music to the skill of music, NAU state school, far superior to Lee University. It just is. I'm not trying to be mean. It just is. God did not bring me to Lee University to learn music. God brought me to Lee University to be with Dr. Horton.
Yeah.
That's why I've said that. I said that through the years. I said that when I got there. I could have gotten a music education, a vocal performance or whatever, at probably a dozen schools in the nation that would have been cheaper, and I would have gotten a much more vigorous education. God didn't bring me to Lee to learn music. God brought me to Lee to be with Dr. Horton. And so
learn ministry.
To learn ministry. And you don't learn that, you're right, you don't learn it in the classroom. You learn that by being a part of it.
Yeah.
And we need that education, because we're all not like, Gabe, who probably walked in and could have aced Theory 4 from the day he was 18 years old. It's like, he's like, I didn't need education anyway. We're like, man, we couldn't even read music.
And that's the funny thing. I loved the classroom part of it, but it's like, man, I love this, but $10,000 a semester for like, this don't help me make more money at a gig. And honestly, it's like the more educated you get as a musician, the less money you make. I mean, I saw that with the Wyatts, who were arguably the most talented professors there.
Yeah.
They'd smoke pound for pound. Musically speaking, they'd smoke anybody at that school at that time. And you just look, I mean, I remember this one day watching them and somebody else from the department pull out at the same time and look at their vehicles. And I'm like, maybe I don't want to be a jazz musician.
Hey, it's like this. Brad Knight, probably arguably the most, the best arranger of Christian music in the world, was a communications major at least. Because it bored him. He knew it all already.
He went and studied. He did what Gabe said. He went and studied with Larry Goss.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
reason he went and he sat down with Larry, Larry had a couple of arranging classes because I was in those classes with him, and those two connected, and they just exploded.
Yep.
And he learned
Yeah.
his stuff being in the studio with Larry.
Yeah.
Yep.
LeAnn, what would you recommend to somebody interested to be a worship leader or music pastor?
I'll go in a slightly different direction because I absolutely agree with all of that. But I think if you're going to be a leader in front of people, I think you have to be willing to work on yourself. A really hot word right now is growth mindset. If you're going to be in a position where people are going to at you, you have to have.
She's so hip. That's what happens when you're 27.
I know.
She's got that growth mindset.
Yeah.
That's right.
Stop
you
the
have
cap.
that growth mindset. You have to be willing to always have open ears, open heart, open mind to hear what it is they're trying to say to you and grow from it instead of take offense at everything that comes at you.
Yes.
Preach.
You know, and that is so right. Listen, young person, if you're watching this and you're interested to be a music pastor, take the licks because they help you grow. And, you know, I was thankful that I was put under some leaders that worried more about my advancement than my feelings. Because unfortunately, when you get under a leader that's only concerned about your feelings, you're not going to grow much. They've got to hurt your feelings sometimes. It's like pastoring. Sometimes you got to hurt people's feelings. You have to tell them the truth, and you know, to be pushed, for sure.
Well, I'll dovetail on that to say, pastors, please don't intentionally hurt your worship leaders' feelings by telling them you don't like them.
Hey, I didn't add.
Yeah.
I want to add something that I think is really crucial, and because I didn't necessarily add anything, but what I would tell them is, without question, study theology.
Yes.
Know the Word of God.
Amen. Rightly divide it. We sing our theology.
There's so much junk, and I love worship music. But there's so much junk out there.
A sloppy wet kiss.
That just doesn't need to be in churches. It does nothing. Jonathan's dying, man.
I'm sorry, man.
Just can't. Oh, yeah. Yeah. But
no,
anyway,
you're right.
So learn theology.
You're right. Because the thing is the thing and really develop that passionate relationship with the Lord, because you know, I can teach someone how to read music. I can teach them about chord structure. I can teach them all the mechanics of doing the job. What I can't teach is how to follow the leading of the Holy Spirit. That kind of has to be born out of a personal relationship of really developing an ear to listen to the voice of God. And that's something that, you know, I think a lot of these new worship pastors, we don't focus on as much. I think they focus so much on, you know, the modern, you know, what they're seeing on YouTube, and, oh, I want to be like that. I want to be like that. But, you know, following and being sensitive, how many times have we, all four of us, been on here and been in a worship set that we had planned? It was all perfect. We knew exactly what was going to happen, and God just speak to our heart and take us in a different direction.
Yeah. And
you can't teach that. You can't really teach that. You just something you have to develop as you learn to listen to the Lord, and, you know, God listening to those songs that he places in your heart at the right moments.
Yeah.
That's a fact. Yeah, the theology thing is big. We're hopefully going to have my brother Sharvis Witted, to talk about music ministry and how the Lord healed him of a disease that he was struggling with for several years. And he said that, you know, congregations sing, you sing your theology. they will remember. Actually,
Yeah.
Ron Canoli, I believe, said this when I interviewed him last
He
year.
did.
You know,
Yeah.
he's like, they might not remember that every point of that sermon, but I guarantee you they're going to walk out singing at least maybe one of those songs or the song that they liked. And if the theology's wrong or the doctrine doesn't jive with your particular denomination, you know, I mean, it's just sloppy and reckless.
I could sing of your love forever.
LeAnn, you wanna land us, because I know we didn't make it through all the points, but it's been about 90 minutes, and although I could go for another half hour, we could do this again. That's the beautiful thing. If the Lord tarries and the creek don't rise, we'll just do a part 2. We'll do a part 2 focusing on just this, what we've been talking the last half hour of how to improve and how to encourage and how to engage and how to get, how to bridge these gaps and what we've done that works, what we've done that's failed horribly and been hilarious, like James saying, like, let's make a country church a CCM church.
Yeah.
Yes.
Been there, done that, got the T-shirt.
Yeah, and when I first got started in music ministry, I thought I had a range like James Coulter, so I don't know how many times I had to stop a song after we got started and said, hold on, we're going to have to take that down a few notches. Hallelujah, Jesus is alive. Hold on. Let's break that down a little bit.
Trial and error, we've all done it.
Trial and error.
Yes, we have.
Let me hit a couple of these. Let me hit a couple of these comments before we start landing the parking the bus. Says the Presbyterian pastor, Brother Corey Colravy, that I used to serve with. Loved his. I love that. He said, "Let me park the bus." I love that. Dustin Keith said, y'all would be surprised the number of atheist musicians filling worship band rosters at medium and larger churches. Easy way to make $300 a week. Dustin, I was at Guitar Center one day and overheard a conversation between two kids that worked there. One of them he looked rock and roll. He had the look, and he said, so I went and audition. That's the word. Audition for this church that will remain nameless, and they got me in. They told me I was going to be hired, but I don't really believe in all that Jesus stuff, so I just didn't even I didn't think it was right to do it. And I'm like, wow, this kid has more integrity than this church. I'm like, how in the world do you go audition somebody, not even ask them? So when are you saved? When did you get saved? Have you been baptized? Tell us your testimony. You're hired. And Dustin also says difficult to do running tracks and loops, running stems essentially, and not a lot of room for the Holy Spirit, spontaneity. And there's an argument for that. There's a conversation to be had there, because you could say the same thing of when you have an orchestra, you don't have a lot of room for spontaneity when you've got 50 musicians. So it's a challenge. It's not impossible, but there's ways to hurdle that. I'd rather that's the kind of problem I'd rather have. I'd rather have the stems and the orchestra and figure out how can we make this spontaneous rather than sacrifice them at the altar of spontaneity.
We Pentecostals just say, hey, we're going to take a praise break.
That's it. Hey, we in E. Strings. Strings, just give us E. Octaves in E, Yeah, Jonathan.
This is a big conversation. There's points on both sides. I think the church often wants to sacrifice quality and excellence for
save $1.
Well, yeah. You guys know the kind of ministry that I've served in, and I absolutely believe in the spontaneity and the move of the Spirit and following along with that. But then I also think sometimes you don't have the skilled musicians to do that, and the loops and the stems and the backing tracks help a whole lot of churches out. So, there's arguments for both sides, but in attempting to park the bus, the church needs worship leaders.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it needs anointed worship leaders. It needs skilled worship leaders. And this is such a complex thing, and we're not going to solve it in this conversation. But one of the things I want to encourage any musician, any worship leader, current worship leader listening to this. We did have one person weigh in on the conversation. They had to raise up their own internally, and I don't see any issue with that.
Amen.
If you are in a leadership position, there is somebody in your church that needs you to pour in, and you should
Yep.
be raising up a new generation. So I'll just leave an encouragement for anybody that's leading worship. Look around you. There's a 3-year-old little boy at my church that has got rhythm that won't quit, and I'm already like on him like a hawk. I'm like, this boy needs lessons. He
Yep.
needs to come up. And Jonathan brought up earlier, one of the reasons the demise of the choir is laziness. Well, I don't want to get in a position as a leader where I'm just in my lane and I'm self-preserving, and I'm just gonna barrel on ahead and not. It's my responsibility to raise up someone to take my place.
Yes.
So I just want to leave that there as an encouragement. If there's got to be someone in your church that has a little bit of skill, and you can coax it out of them. You can train, you can disciple, you can raise up someone new. And clearly the church needs it if there's this kind of shortage. And if somebody doesn't want to spend $80,000 on an education, the educator is going to be you.
Yeah, I'd like to dovetail on that. I'd like to dovetail and say that, I think what I've learned over the years is I try to think about the fact that I am the lead worship leader.
Yeah.
But one of the best things that I can do for the church is to raise up other worship leaders there, in other words. And the crazy thing, I've trained some teenagers over the years, but I've trained 30 and 40-year-olds as well that just I recognized in them, you have a gift to lead the congregation in worship. So you need to do that more. And they'll go, what? I mean, they just sang solos or whatever, but you can see it. And I've helped try to develop that in them. And I think that one of the best things that we can do to conquer some of the worship leader shortage is to raise up the worship leaders, ourselves. We are the recruiting force out there. It's kind of like the recruiters for the armed services, come join the Army. I think a lot of times we have to recognize where God has placed those talents in people and encourage them to bring that to the forefront. And I think the more we do that, it not only it helps the church, because I have found one of the things that I when I first got started, the mentality is that you had a worship leader that led all the worship. But I think what I've enjoyed seeing, we always talk about some of the things that have come along in the past years we talk negative about, but one of the things that I think is positive is the real movement now to be multiple people leading worship in a service. Mm-hmm. And I think that is just a fantastic thing to see. And I've noticed in my own ministry, I have become much less forefront of everything and started trying to use other voices and other people to get out and lead, because I think it actually engages the congregation better than just hearing me all the time.
Amen.
Yeah, I just want to say we have reached a point, and this will be short. Years ago, I went to a class at Regent University. It was executives from Sony coming in telling us how to be songwriters, professional songwriters, and make a living at it. And the guy stepped up, and I won't go through the whole thing, but he stepped up. He was from R&D for Sony Music on the Christian side of it. And he said, I know we're supposed to teach you how to be a professional songwriter and make a living at it. He said, but those days are done. You can't do it anymore, because you can no longer write a decent song, have it on a CD that makes a ton of money, and you actually make a living. You have to write a song that song makes a lot of money, and it's not going to make a lot of money because we're now streaming. And so he said that, and And what it made me realize was it kind of broke my heart at the time, because I felt like we had shifted from something that was no longer going to be. But then I realized that there is another answer, because songs have been around for,
All
ever.
of human history.
Yeah. And so it doesn't mean that songs are going to end. It just means something's changing and it's going to shift. And so now the question is, what do we do now? And I think that's where the church is at, with worship leaders, with choirs, with orchestras, with all of that. It's not a question of how do we fix what's broken. It's not broken. And if it is broken, it's not coming back. How do we shift? And I think we've actually said some of those things in closing today. How do we shift and move forward from here? Because the answer is not people coming out of Lee University or colleges like that. I think we need to shift away from the I can't believe I'm saying this, because I am one. We need to shift away from the professional musician, and we need to raise up people within the church that can lead the church in worship.
That's good.
Well, listen, everybody, we thank you so much for signing on. I just saw Danny Murray sign on and is watching with us. Good to see you. Danny's head of Voices of Lee, and I'd love to have you on here sometime talking about your experience over the years, seeing
Danny Murray's phenomenal.
See this play out in real time. But we've been talking about the shortage of music, worship leaders that is prevalent in the church, and the problems that are plaguing some of the church music scene in the church. And I won't say that we answered every problem. In fact, I think we may have opened up more of Pandora's box than we got put in. But anyway, I think at least it was great for us to just share and encourage one another. And if you enjoyed this podcast and you're watching it, please like it and share it and subscribe. We'll be doing more things like this as well. I really appreciate our special guests with LeAnn and James. Fantastic comments, and so much thanks from me for really pouring in. And I've really been blessed to hear some of these. It's really made me dig in my own soul and think about this thing. The good news is this is not a crisis that is not that we can't turn around. I think that enough people start, there are great young musicians and even middle-aged musicians and singers and people out there that are just waiting to discover the calling that God has on their life. And, I think what he just said was so fantastic, and I'll say this in closing. A few weeks ago, we did this, we actually did this thing is Funny Church Fails. And we did a whole podcast on it. You have to watch it. It's hilarious. We just played video after video of funny church fails, worship fails. And the crazy part was every single one we were looking at as we were going through this list of all the videos, every church looked and sounded the exact same. And it was kind of sad to me, because I thought we really have become almost like this carbon cookie cutter kind of mindset that, we got to black everything out. We got to have, the LED walls, and we've got to have, the latest from Elevation or Bethel or something like that. And we've got to have the same type of setups and the lighting shows, and everything looks the exact same, sounds the exact same. And I was just telling Gabe, I said, it kind of broke my heart as we were laughing. I said, at the same time, this is breaking my heart, because I'm looking on here and I'm thankful for Bethel and Elevation for all that. I think God's doing great things with them. But I think sometimes we have professionalized worship to the point that we make people feel like, you can't do this unless you're a professional, unless you have. But, it's not true. We can develop and get people involved in worship. And I believe that we should. I believe God's called us to do it. And we're working on that where we're at, and I know you guys are doing the same. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being here on Soul Vitamins tonight. Everyone, thank you for joining us, and we hope that you'll come back next Tuesday. And we love and appreciate all of you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us, guys. Love y'all.
Be blessed.